Hey guys, it's Inigo. If you're new to my channel, I normally make ASMR and other relaxing and entertaining content, but today I want to talk about quite an important topic, mental health. So the 10th of October is World Mental Health Day, and it's a pretty good day to talk about these things, I figure. So if you have been here a while, you might remember that last year around this time, I also did a video talking about mental health. And for that video, I was also asked by BetterHelp to mention them in the video, which I did back then. I was contacted by them regarding World Mental Health Day. I was already planning to make a video, but I figured it would be a good tie-in. Back then, there wasn't as much known about them as there is now, especially the last couple weeks. A lot of information has come out about the company and about how a lot of people have had negative experiences with them. Now, from the point of view as a creator, when last year I got the email, I talked about it with people around me and I did research. At the time I was able to see, positive reviews, and I figured I personally am in, a privileged position living in a country where health insurance is mandatory and government funded. So I have access, to therapy if I need it. And a lot of my viewers live in countries where that is not the case. So I thought by offering that as an alternative, it could be helpful for people. Now, in lieu of, the recent accusations and just information coming out, I do want to say that, especially at this time, I do not recommend BetterHelp. I think it's very expensive as opposed to what they advertise it as, because they make you pay the money up front, and it is a lot more often than you're advertised. And there are countless stories of people that signed up and they got assigned a therapist, but they never showed up on their appointments, thus them paying for no service, and the company's, denying all liability. So at this point, I don't think it's a good company. So I also wanted to make a video and offer some resources that hopefully can be useful to people. So before I start rambling a little bit more about mental health, I want to let everyone know that in the link down below, I made a document with a list of resources that you might find helpful. I try to include stuff that is both international and also some resources for, countries where I have my biggest audience, namely the US, the UK, and Australia. But a lot of them, the majority, are international. So first and foremost, if you are in a crisis, or if you are in a state of mind where you feel where you might hurt yourself, the top listed resources are lists to crisis centers and crisis hotlines in pretty much every country that I could find. So if you are in that spot right now, I would advise you to look that up and get the help that you need. Besides that, I try to find a lot of resources where people can get assistance locally where they live to find a therapist or social worker, so any sort of support like that. And I also included a lot of kind of like chat services that are either manned by volunteers or they run on donations, or you can connect with people around the world who might be dealing with the same things, And the research that I did onto these platforms, I have found that most, if not all, have pretty good systems in place to avoid abuse of any kind of the system. So I urge you to check these out if you are struggling and you're not able to find any support or help or medical attention locally. But I do really want to urge you that if you are dealing with mental illness that is negatively impacting your life in a serious way, please look into what you can get locally in, the area that you live in. I know a lot of countries have systems in place for people with low income, to connect people with charities or volunteers. Please, anything you need to do to get the help you need, it is very, very much worth it. It's difficult for me to really say, like, you gotta do this or you gotta do that, especially because I'm not a professional. I've been in therapy myself for a very long time. I've had quite a lot of different types of therapy, but I'm not in a position to help anyone personally in a professional manner. And there's only one place you can go to that, and that is to talk with actual licensed therapists. So, okay. Oh, and if you take a look at the list that I put in the description, and if there's any service that you personally know about that I haven't listed, please contact me, because I will research them and I can put it in to help other people. Okay, so I really hope that, someone might find any use in these researches that I've listed. But for now, I just want to talk a little bit about mental health and my thoughts on it. And so I've talked about it quite a lot. I've always been open about it and I've never really hidden it. I've been struggling with my own mental health, and like I said earlier, I have a lot of experience with all sorts of therapies and, support. And I feel like there's kind of two ways to deal with your mental health. And one of them is coping, which is something that I feel a lot of people do. Pretty much everyone that's struggling copes in some way. This can be by distracting yourself with an endless amount of things. Some of these distractions can be healthy, like throwing yourself into art or sports. Some can be a little bit more unhealthy, and you have to start thinking about addictions to, substances, or like just alcohol, or, there's a lot of things that people use to not have to deal with daily life and whatever's going on inside their own mind. But then there's, some more substantial coping mechanisms that you can learn about, especially for anxiety and stress-based disorders. Things like meditation, breathing exercises, those would be healthy. And there's a lot of different techniques that you can learn on your own. There's online resources. A lot of people learn them from their therapists. But at the end of the day, a lot of these don't really resolve the issue. And I would say for the majority of cases and the majority of type of these things, medication can be, in a way, a coping mechanism. In a lot of ways, it tends to be more of a long-term coping mechanism when you're talking about antidepressants or antipsychotics. And then you also have anti-anxiety, which are intended at least to be short-term, even though there are people that take them long-term, but they're pretty dangerous to take long-term. But what all of these things have in common is that they don't really look at the root issue. They're just kind of like putting a band-aid over the sore spot. While it might be helpful, it's not really changing much in the long term. But I found that when you are in crisis or nearing crisis or just in a really, really bad spot, I call it kind of going into, survival mode. And at that point, you're so low that all you can kind of do is cope and take your rest where you can and distract yourself where you can until you're in like a stronger position to really, deal with the root cause. And I find that for myself, I've been, I've been through quite a couple bad patches, and with the coping mechanisms that I've learned over the years, and just in general having experience with how my own mind works and how I react to things, I've come to kind of, I've become pretty good at gauging whether or not I'm in a situation where I'm just going to have to survive for a bit, or if I'm able to kind of, pull through and make some more substantial changes in my routine and kind of get myself together, I think it's better in general to, especially if you're kind of new to this and you've never really gotten help from it. I think getting that help is really important because your therapist or your psychologist or psychiatrist will be probably better at kind of gauging like what is best for you at this moment, at least until you kind of learn to look at yourself a little better. And then the second way of dealing with mental illness is to actually tackle the root issue. And I would say for the majority, this is possible. There are some things that are a little bit harder to treat in a way where, it's not like a daily problem. If you're talking about things like schizophrenia, that's not something that you can just therapy or talk your way out of. But of course you can learn how to deal with it and to definitely like improve the quality of life, Also things like bipolar would fall under this category, I think. But for most people that deal with depression or mood disorders or anxiety disorders, while I don't think you can be like cured in that sense, like it's gone now and it's never gonna come back in the same form, you can definitely look at the root of what's causing these feelings or possibly these disorders. And there are a lot of different therapies for it. I think the most well-known one is cognitive behavioral therapy, which has proven to be quite successful for a lot of people. And the best way to get cognitive behavioral therapy is, of course, with a therapist. But there are online resources with like sheets and kind of like homework type stuff that you can do to kind of teach yourself these techniques. So if you're not able to get a professional to work with you, that definitely is an option. And you also have DBT, which is another sort of like technique, and this one definitely has a lot of kind of like homework stuff and resources, and a lot of people have uploaded pretty much like entire books on it with a lot of different exercises. I personally have never gotten DBT myself, but I know quite a bit about it from other people in my life. I think it was originally mostly used for BPD, so that's the personality disorder, borderline personality disorder, but it can be applied to, a variety of different disorders and issues. And since a lot of people that struggle with mental health, the cause is trauma, especially childhood trauma, abuse trauma of all different kinds. For that type of thing, there is things like EMDR, which is kind of hard to explain if you've never heard of it. But basically, the theory is that you recall past memories and then you kind of rewire them by activating REM, so rapid eye movements. I've personally had EMDR for quite a variety of issues. I do have PTSD and I have complex PTSD, so there's been a handful of occurrences in my life that kind of culminated in my PTSD, and I have tackled the majority of them now, and I feel like it's a pretty effective type of therapy. When I used to kind of like look back on some of these memories, it would either be really hard to get to them and just make me feel anxious, or I would think about them and just instantly be panicked. And now when I look at them, I can look at them more neutrally because you kind of reprogram them in a sense. And these types of therapies often tend to be pretty difficult and hard and confrontational because you're going to deal often with habits and perhaps unhealthy coping mechanisms that you've developed throughout the years to, get yourself through the day, which is very logical often, but to have to unlearn that and kind of deal with the, ugly side of what's going on in your head can be quite hard and uncomfortable. But in my experiences, it's always been worth it, and I've come out of it stronger, and I've come out of it being able to cope and deal with whatever's going on a lot easier. So yeah, these are just like a couple ways. There's a variety of therapies that are out there. I just don't have experience with all of them. These are just a couple of the common ones. And so yeah, that's kind of how I view it. I think a good combination would be to work on those deeper things once you're ready for it, because that's important too. You can't really force yourself to be ready for these intense therapies. But yeah, that, and then to combine them with healthy coping skills. Again, there's like a lot of resources out there to help you with them. Some of them I've listed in the list that I made. Yeah, I think that's most of what I wanted to address. I do think it's important to understand that if you're dealing with this, it's normal. Your brain is reacting to things that are happening to you, that have happened to you. There's nothing abnormal about any of these disorders, They're just not very helpful often, and if you're ready for it, I definitely would encourage you to start dealing with these pains and these memories and these things inside you that make it so much harder for yourself, And what I see a lot is a lot of people leaning on friends and family and close ones. And while I think it can be very good to talk about what's going on and to have people be aware of your situation, I definitely think it's unhealthy to do that in lieu of, pursuing actual help, whether that's through a therapist or that's through like self-help type exercises. Because oftentimes people that you talk to, they might be very well-intentioned, but they are not professionals, and they could definitely tell you things that will make it worse, whether in the short term or the long term. So use talking to people to make connections, to feel loved, to feel understood, to feel not alone with whatever you're dealing with, but don't lean on people in a way, to kind of treat them as your therapist, because that's not healthy for either of you. So, that being said, I definitely sympathize with everyone that's going through a rough time right now. I know what it feels like to just be at that rock bottom, and if I could, I would make it so that nobody would ever have to feel that way. But you're definitely not alone. There are many people that are dealing with this. There are many people that you can talk to, and there's help available. And I wish you all the best. Again, if you want to take a look, I've listed a lot of resources down below, and I'm taking suggestions as well. But for now, I hope you are well, and I will see you again very soon.